Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Welcome to Parenting in the 21st Century. I'm Zina Shevchik. Today we have with us Chef Gail Sokol, who's going to talk with us about kids and cooking. In addition to being a chef, Gail is an instructor at Schenectady County Community College in its culinary arts program and an author of a book on professional baking. Thank you for being with us today, Gail.
It's my pleasure.
Before we start talking about kids and cooking, would you tell us a little bit about your background and your experience?
Okay, my background, I have a bachelor's in chemistry from Union College. I've always loved science and always loved kitchen science and always being in the kitchen. And then I have a master's degree in business administration, and then I have an associate's in culinary arts from Schenectady Community College. My mom can't cook or bake. I hope she's not watching. And I think probably that's where I sort of got the urge, the need to bake and cook. I always felt very comforted by that and the smells that come out of the kitchen. And I always felt very safe in the kitchen, especially with my grandma teaching me a little bit. But I basically would, if she would get a cookbook as a gift, I sort of stole it from her. And I used to read that all the time. And in the summer, while kids were reading books, I was usually reading cookbooks over and over and over.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
When I first started as a librarian, I would see some of my librarian friends reading cookbooks, and I would laugh and say, "What do you mean you're reading
How do you read a
cookbook?"
Well, if you're looking, I used to look up special, different things like, today I'm interested in looking up a cheesecake or a cake, or I'm really in the mood for a brownie. And you look that up in the cookbook, and you learn knowledge as just through reading through the ingredient list and reading through the procedure and the method, and you can learn a lot.
And I have to say that once I had children and I had to cook, I did cook every day, and my mother didn't do much cooking. Let's say I didn't pick it up from her. She cooked a meal every day, but I didn't pick it up from her. She certainly wasn't enthusiastic about it, and so I approached it with a less than enthusiastic.
Well, that's it. You sort of take from the way you were brought up, and I don't know where I came from. My mother's always saying that I must have been hatched from someone else because she never really was allowed in the kitchen when she was a little girl. Her mom sort of wanted the kitchen to be, very, very neat and clean, and she just did not let her in. So my motto was, if I clean up, can I do whatever I want? Can I do whatever I want? And she'd say, yeah, just do whatever you want, but clean up. I don't want to see a mess. So I'd make dinner, I'd make cakes, I'd make anything I could think of since I was a little girl. And I remember carrying the chair over from the kitchen table all the way over to the stove, probably when I was a little too young, and I won't even mention how old I thought I was, and making those little packages of pudding. With my dad watching me at the stove on occasion.
Just for safety reasons.
Just for safety reasons, but saying, I made pudding, and I was 5 or 6 years old.
So you were curious, obviously,
absolutely.
right from the get-go.
Absolutely. And whenever, my grandmother was making something, I'd say, can I help you? Can I help you? And I think it was there. It's sort of something that I think was inside of me.
Right.
Sometimes you're chosen for a profession when you're very little. You'll see a young boy, for instance, playing with, construction games and tools and what have you, and you sort of know when they grow up, they may be interested in, it might be engineering, but it might be mechanics, whatever. But it can start that young, and if you have a passion for it, it should be nurtured.
So that's, I appreciate what your mother did then, very much so, in the sense that she gave you a chance to experiment.
Even if she didn't understand it herself, and that's why in my book I actually, basically attributed the book to her. I made a tribute to her saying, thank you for letting me do whatever I wanted in the kitchen, because without that, I couldn't have even written a book or grown up to be who I was if she didn't give me that freedom. If I wasn't allowed in the kitchen, I wouldn't have done it.
Right. And I have to say that for me, I was always worried that the kids were going to hurt themselves, and my fear probably stop them, and that's and I know that that's probably is you don't have to be afraid, because there's many things you can do in the kitchen.
There's not only many things you can do, but you can make them age appropriate. So depending on how old your child is, sometimes my daughters, as they were little, I would put the just their little high chairs near the area where I was cooking, not close to a cooktop or anything, but near the table, the work surface. And I remember hitting dough and making pizza and just giving my daughter a few bowls and spoons to clank on so she could feel a part of what I was doing. And I would talk to her and interact. She might have been 6 months, 8 months, and probably it went right over her head. But eventually, as she got to be older, she got a piece of that pizza dough, and she was working on it and working on it. And I remember once making a pizza dough, and she worked about an hour on it. I said, "Can we bake it yet, please?" Because it was so, at that point, it was so elastic. We had developed so much gluten in the pizza. Pizza lovers will know what I'm talking about. I said, "If we don't bake it now, you're not going to want to eat it." So she said, "I'm just having so much fun." So it was great. And, just make it age appropriate. And as they get older, you can start introducing new things, more complicated tasks.
Let's backtrack a bit and tell us how you made the transition from chemistry and business to actually becoming an instructor and
okay, it's very interesting. I probably thought, at one point, maybe I would become a chemist, maybe go to medical school at that point, until I realized I was going to pass out if I saw more, blood, and that stuff just really wasn't for me. Chemistry, I always loved mixing things together and forming reactions, and that's what cooking and baking really is. So when I realized I could do this, but in those days when I was growing up, not that it was so long ago, but it really wasn't encouraged for a woman to go to culinary school. Some women did, but I came from a college preparatory school, and basically you were told, chemistry sounds better than cooking. Chemistry is good, cooking can be a hobby. And you do that, and that's good. When you get married, you'll do that. Well, I wanted it to be more, but everyone was sort of poo-pooing the idea. So I went for chemistry, and I did my thing until finally I got married and had small kids and said, I can't take it anymore. I've got to do something in the kitchen with food, and decided to go back to culinary school. At that point, I couldn't go away to culinary school. I had a home here. My husband had a job here, and I had 2 small daughters. So I said, you know what? I'm going back to school. And the only, the area culinary school that was in the area was Schenectady, and it was a good one. So I said, I think I'm going to go back. I took a course, loved it, and continued.
So is that like a 2-year program?
It's a 2-year program. I did it in 2.5 because I did it part-time because I had little kids.
Right.
I took courses as I could. You can do it as quickly or as slowly as you want to. There are people on the 5-year plan or even longer. Some students are return students. They might be working in another industry or another field. Maybe they've lost their job through the economy, what have you, and they want to come back to school for whatever reason. And we have tons of students like that come back. I was an older student when I came back, and it was not a problem. I was welcomed by people. I met people from all different walks of life. It was the neatest thing. It was I think my most fun degree to get. Yeah. It really was.
That's great to hear. Well, let's talk a little bit about the benefits of cooking with children.
Oh, there's so many benefits. Not only do they learn incidentally without even realizing it, you are teaching them measurement, sanitation, washing their hands, how to keep things safe. When you're cooking with raw eggs, for instance, you don't want to get salmonella. You can introduce so many lessons this way. They're learning about science. They're also learning about how to work with you. They're also learning about basically, they're not jumping around, they're settling in, and they're doing an activity that they can share with mom or dad or Aunt Edna or grandma or auntie, whoever it is, or another sibling. It forces you to work together. And that's why I love kids working together in pairs. So if there is a sibling or a cousin that's there, have them work together. They need to get along. So there's no arguing. And if there's arguing, you don't do it anymore. Bring them back when they're calm. And I think there's a lot of quality time with parents that I think people don't get anymore. Mm-hmm. People are in a rush. I don't want to put down the Food Network because I'm a definite addict of the Food Network, but there's a lot of people making things so fast. There's a limit. There's something to be said about slow food and enjoying it with your children and making and cutting vegetables and forming a fruit salad. If they can't cut, you cut and make a salad or whatever it is, whether it's a pizza or whether it's beef bourguignon, whatever it is, enjoy it. Make it an activity.
Right. instead of a chore. Make it
It's not a chore.
family activity.
Something that your mother probably looked at as a chore, and then you did, and then my mother certainly wasn't going to do any cooking. I think she made a pie in 1969 once. And I remember, thinking, she doesn't like cooking, but what is there not to like? Because I think I was watching Julia Child, and I know Julie and Julia is coming
Yes.
out. And I actually wrote to Julia Child as a teenager. I was 14 and she wrote me back, so I actually have that letter, and she always typed, but she would cross things out, and so I have that letter from her, and I'll always cherish it. So I really was watching her as my role model instead of my mom.
Right. Well, thank goodness.
Thank goodness I had Julia, right?
Yeah, right. TV too.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think in these economic times, as you alluded to, everybody has to eat, and so cooking can be the activity that brings the family together.
Absolutely.
And also you eat together.
Think of one activity that doesn't surround food, whether it's a funeral, a wedding, birthday, whatever it is. Food is always surrounding that activity. It helps calm us down. It de-stresses us. It's comforting. It's used in a celebratory way. There's foods everywhere, and you've got to eat. You've got to eat to survive. And why not eat good food and be in control of what you're eating?
Well, that's another thing that you're emphasizing is healthy
Absolutely,
food, and that you can
absolutely.
teach your kids to eat healthfully.
Absolutely.
as
And
well.
yes, I made, I created a baking book, and I am a pastry chef by trade. I am also well trained in, nutrition aspects, because I teach nutrition at Schenectady. I teach sanitation, I teach baking. But it's very important, especially in this day and age right now, with children becoming more obese. My interest has really taken, and I've always been personally interested in health and fitness. So I think I've carried that onto my family by adding whole grains. If you're making a pie, add a cup of whole wheat flour. Take out that one extra cup of all-purpose flour and substitute the whole grain. Try to add some low-fat things into your diet so you're not eating fully fatted things. When you make a pizza, it's super easy to use part skim mozzarella or even fat-free mozzarella as part of the cheese. Not all of it, because I understand fat-free isn't great as far as taste, and it can be a little rubbery. But if you mix and match and you combine a little bit of something that's higher in fat, a little bit of something low in fat or fat-free, and blend them together, you will never taste the difference. And you're eating healthy and you're saving yourself calories. And if you have cholesterol problems or something else, you're watching your diet. You've got to always watch your diet. And it should become a way of life. You should never go on a diet. It should be a way of life.
Right. I do know that that you can change the palate, what you're experiencing on your palate, because I moved from whole milk to skim milk over a long, months,
Yes.
maybe a year. I gradually went to skim milk, and it became ordinary to me. And the same with, I mix a little bit of whole wheat pasta with the regular pasta, and so for my family, like
Yep.
I like whole wheat pasta or whole grain bread, but sometimes they haven't responded positively,
right.
so I mix it.
And there are some now that are on the market that you can't even tell they're whole grain. So you're basically fooling your family. They have omega-3 acids, fatty acids added to them. There's a lot of different healthy things that are coming out on the market. It's wonderful to be thinking healthy now because there's so many products out there. Whether you are, allergic to gluten, whether you are sodium, you're on a sodium-free diet, whether you're watching your weight and your cholesterol. There are so many different things out there, but you have to be aware of the products, the processed foods, where there are maybe some sodium questions or high-fat issues or trans fat issues, which I know is a big deal right now.
Why don't you talk about that before? I do have to say that the supermarkets are incredible now, and I'm so happy that they are with what you can find. I think that a lot of these products, whether it was gluten-free or other kind of, or dairy-free, they used to be found only in like city,
Health food
urban,
store,
or health
urban,
food store,
right.
or urban areas, and now...
Oh no, it's everywhere. You can go to just an everyday grocery store now, and usually there will be an organic section. There'll be at least somewhat. There'll be a healthier section that you can get things that don't have any added preservatives or low sodium or sodium substitutes that you would never have had when I was a kid, or flour even 10, 15 years ago. So yeah, we are definitely coming into, you couldn't even get bread flour at a supermarket.
Right.
I had to mail order it. And now you can find several different types of flours in the grocery store. So I say mix it up. Try things. If your family doesn't like something right away, I tried brown rice one day. No white rice. Went right to brown rice. My daughter was like, boycott. She loves rice, wouldn't eat it. So what I decided was, and they have two different cooking times. Brown rice and white rice have two different cooking times because brown rice has the hull on it.
Right.
So
Like
it takes
oatmeal,
longer
like
to cook.
real oatmeal.
Right, and it has the hull, and it takes longer to cook through versus the more processed stuff. So what I did was I made a small pot of brown rice, separate pot of white rice, and I put a little bit of the brown rice in, and it sort of looked like sort of speckled. She thought that was sort of cool. So she ate it, and then I added a little more, and then I got to the point where she sort of let me know, okay, whoa. Okay, speckled is good, it's getting browner, I won't eat it. So I just sort of backed off a little bit, and I realized some is better than nothing, and Rome wasn't built in a day, so be easy. Don't force something down someone's throat. You can't do that and say, okay, today we're eating all tofu. Yeah. You can't do that if they're not used to something like that, or else you're going to turn people off. And I have students that, tofu is a 4-letter word. They wouldn't dare eat something like that. But eventually, I bring things into my class, my culinary class for college students, and I bring things in and I say, try this. And I don't tell them what's in it right away. Try this. What do you think? I love it. Did you know there was tofu in it? They don't realize that tofu doesn't taste like anything. It's a texture thing more than anything else. And if they have it presented to them in the right way, they'll eat it.
Right.
And they'll like it.
Right.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about trans fat. The direction I was going in with this is that it's amazing. When I was growing up, for example, smoking was just normal, and through public. I don't know, the culture changed, the government got involved, scientists started speaking up, nutritionists started speaking up, whatever, doctors started speaking up, and so that now in our culture today, smoking is very bad, and everybody recognizes that, and so that's accepted, that you can say no to a cigarette. And it seems to me that with healthy food, that's can be changed as well, and it is changing. So, and trans fats are one example of.
Yes, and there's a big controversy right now. New York City has gone trans fat free, as has Albany County. And I've been a consultant with the Albany County Health Department about the trans fats. Trans fats are basically, they raise your bad cholesterol, they lower your good cholesterol, and they have been reported to be responsible for certain types of cancer. And definitely cardiovascular disease. Basically, years and years ago, food manufacturers took oils, healthy oils, and oils can go rancid. And they're healthier. Liquid oils are healthier. By nature, they're more monounsaturated, which is healthier for your heart. Think of olive oil, canola oil, things like that. But if you solidify these oils, they're more shelf stable. They don't become rancid. So what they did was they piped hydrogen gas through them in the laboratory. So they got to be semi-solid or all solid. Think something like a solid vegetable shortening, okay?
Crisco.
But Crisco, and I don't want to give a bad name to Crisco, that's why I didn't mention it.
Yeah.
But it's now trans fat free. Okay? But there's still some vegetable shortenings on the market that are not trans fat free. And we must get rid of those trans fats because, yes, they do prolong shelf life of certain items like crackers, cereals, even Gatorade used to have, not to bring up sports drinks, but Gatorade had trans fats in it as something that would keep things separated as far as the emulsification of the liquid. And right now, trans fats we know are so bad. We didn't know anything about them years ago, and it was basically to keep the shelf life longer so that we could just keep crackers on the shelf for 6 months until somebody buys them, and then food manufacturers wouldn't have to change so much. But right now we know they're just so bad. As of January 2006, the federal government and the FDA has said that food items have to be on the ingredient list and on the nutrition facts panel on the side of whatever box you're buying of whatever item it is, should list the number of grams of trans fats. Because before, I used to show my students how to guess how many.
Right, that's what I was going to ask you, is that how, I mean, I know a lot of the packages today say no trans fat.
They say
on the
zero
outside.
trans fats, but if you look,
That's what I was gonna
that's on the
ask you.
nutrition facts panel, but if you look on the ingredient list, very often it'll say partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. If you see that high up in the ingredient list, because ingredients are listed in the order of the prominence and the order of the weight that they're used in. So if you see number one ingredient is sugar, the majority of that food is sugar. If you see whole wheat flour, the majority of that's a good item. Whole wheat flour is good for you. But if you see partially hydrogenated, soybean oil or let's say coconut oil, right in the beginning, like within the first line or two, you know that probably has a minimum, or it's got to have a maximum of 0.5 or half a gram of trans fats in it. All right, but the FDA says you can still call it 0 grams, and they fool you. So people don't like portion control, right? How many people can eat one potato chip or whatever?
Right.
So they're eating a couple of portions of something that says 0 grams of trans fat. If you say, well, this thing may have up to half a gram in it, and you're eating 2 portions of that item, you may be actually getting up to 1 gram of trans fats in there. And there is no maximum safe value now. No one really knows.
Okay.
Years from now, we might know, but research is ongoing.
Yeah.
But I would prefer to eat and give none, as little as possible, to the people I love, because I know it's so bad for you.
Okay, good. Let's go back to the kids, about what age to start cooking with children. You were talking about cooking when your daughters were in high chairs.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you can do it right from the get-go.
I think you can do it from the get-go. I think, like I said, make it age appropriate. Don't give your child, a piece of puff pastry dough and say, okay, go make some sort of an apple puff pastry. They're not going to know what to do. And, they may have fun and throw it around a little, but just remember, age appropriate. So in the beginning, give your kid a bowl, a spoon to clack around while you're doing whatever you're doing, and let them see what you're doing. Okay, and if they're really not into it and they crawl away or they walk away, I used to put my daughter on top of the counter, safely, obviously, and I wouldn't have any knives there or anything that she could get burnt with, or never near the cooktop. And if they walk away, you know what? They're not interested now. Pull them back into the kitchen, maybe if you have something to mix that's more fun, all right? But I have never seen a kid not want to spread frosting on a cupcake, or make a cheese sandwich. Or my daughter would never eat lunch, so I'd always have to be creative. So I'd take out my cookie cutters, star shapes and heart shapes, and I used to have to make a regular sandwich for her. She didn't like the crust, by the way, so I'd cut off the crust.
Not unusual.
But I'd have to cut it in little star shapes, and I used to make little, cheese and ham, or whatever it was, PBJ, and she would eat it if it was in the shape. So presentation's everything to a kid. So if you show something to a child, you can make this really pretty, they'll eat it. And they will, if they can participate in the making of it, they're more apt to eat it also. So as you get older, the most ideal age to really start my cooking classes at Schenectady, because I'm the director of the cooking and baking program there that I started about 8 years ago, is about 10 years old is ideal for a cooking class, because that's when I would introduce knife skills. You take a cutting board out, nothing like on a plate. Don't, cut like my mother used to on a plate.
Yes, my mother too.
And it's really not a safe thing to do. Get a flat vegetable or cut an apple in half and show them how to really hold a knife properly by the handle, to choke up on it like you would on a bat or a tennis racket, so that they feel safe. That's the first thing I teach kids. Feel safe with that knife. That knife is not, you should be in control of that knife. The knife should not be controlling you. And you want to be capable of knowing which is the sharp end and which is not. And some people might not be aware of that. And these newfangled knives, sometimes all sides are sharp. So you have to be very careful. And then I'll give them vegetables to chop up, whether it's parsley, whether it's a celery, whatever it is. And they have to learn to control that vegetable so it's not so roly-poly on the cutting board.
Well, you made a good suggestion about cutting something in half.
Get a flat
and then
surface.
having it flat.
Even if it's a carrot, cut it in half lengthwise. Give it to your child so it's flat. And then eventually they'll learn how to cut it, because they'll be watching you and you'll have good knife skills. And that's what I do. I'll teach them eventually to do that. And then kids can start doing anything. Pizza's the easiest thing to do. And don't buy a pizza dough. Yeah, they have great ones in the supermarket. But you know what? You can make it in 2 seconds. It only has 4 or 5 ingredients. That's
and
it.
the kids
Super
probably
easy.
like to.
And the kids can see the origin of where it's coming from, and it's got good things in it. And make it partially whole grain. Instead of, if your pizza dough has 4 cups of all-purpose flour, let's say, put 2 whole grain cups of a different flour, whether it's whole wheat, spelt, whatever you want to do, a different type of flour, and then put in 2 cups of all-purpose. Remember, wheat flour has gluten, so you do need gluten to give it structure and to make that chewiness that we all love. But you really don't want to, I wouldn't put in oatmeal, but you really want to make sure that you get a little whole grain in there because it's really good for you. And add lots of vegetables and stuff, and and have them be a part of that. Maybe they can help you whisk a salad dressing together, and you're learning. Whenever you make a vinaigrette, what is that? You learn about immiscible liquids. Oil and vinegar separate. They have surface tension. The oil stays with the oil and the vinegar stays with the vinegar. What is that? Well, you're going to learn that in science when you get older.
Right.
So there's a lot of incidental learning going on in the kitchen that they don't even know about. And I have kids in my baking camps that'll say, I learned about osmosis in high school's science class, and I heard it from you first years ago. So that's sort of cool to know that these kids are taking away science lessons, but they're in the kitchen.
Tell us a little bit about your program at Schenectady Community
Okay, I
College.
started it, like I said, about 8 years ago. I just finished my last session in the summer. I do Saturdays during the year, 3 hours, 9 to 12. And I usually have a theme in the fall. It's usually a theme like 5 weeks to a gourmet meal or 5 weeks of pizza. And I make everything from savory to sweet things. That's just for example. In the spring, it's always healthy cooking and baking, where I introduce tofu and beans. And we make lasagnas, and we make healthy salads. And we work with, things that the kids might never have seen before because the parent might be frightened of tofu and beans. It's very scary stuff. So they don't understand it, so they want to learn, and they actually can quell their parents' fears, and then maybe they'll start eating it at home. And then in the summer, I have a baking camp, strictly baking. So that's Monday through Thursday, because the college is closed in the summer on Fridays, and that's from 9 to 2:30. So every season has something going on, and they can call the Office of Continuing Education.
Okay, so the Office of Continuing Education
Yes.
at Schenectady County
Yep.
Community College. I think that's a great idea to have the kids learn maybe from an outsider. If they don't have a grandma or an
Right.
aunt or something, from an outsider, and then the child becomes comfortable in the kitchen.
Absolutely.
And they can carry that
And
over
they go
into the
back and
home.
impart that knowledge to, sometimes one child came to me and said, my grandmother makes the best apple pie. Well, we were making pies that week, and I said, let's find out if grandma's pie is better than yours or yours is better than grandma's. And I think grandma ended up asking him, what did she put in her crust? That was really good. So, there may be little secrets that I can give them, little tips that they can go back, and it's more quality time with their grandparents, more quality time with the parents. It's a win-win situation because kids, their self-esteem goes up. They feel like they're actually creating something for their parents that is going to be loved. And very often parents will say, Christmas is coming up, or the holidays are coming up, or someone's birthday is coming up. Can you make that cake that you made in
There
Chef
you
Gail's
go.
class? And very often they use these recipe packets for years and years and years to come. They become favorites.
And what a gift to receive food from anyone.
Absolutely.
And for a child to be able to accomplish that, I would imagine it would just generate
It's wonderful.
all
I mean,
sorts of-
homemade things are great, right? So, you always liked it when a child comes home with homemade whatever it is. But when it's a homemade baked good, that's made with love, because you have to spend time doing that, and that just means you love me. You wouldn't be giving this to me or spending time in the kitchen unless you did.
Right. So that's
I
wonderful.
love it, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your book here, just
Okay.
because I know that you are an author.
Yes.
And I want you to give.
Okay.
have the
It's called
opportunity.
About Professional Baking, and it took me about 3.5 years to write. All good times, spending lots and lots of times, researching ingredients and baking over and over again, just to taste test and make sure that everyone enjoyed what I was making, the recipes worked, et cetera. This is being used as a tool for not only home bakers, but specifically specifically, it was written as a textbook. So it is being used in high schools across the country and certain colleges that have culinary programs. But a lot of high schools have been picking it up, which is nice. It's based on ingredients. So I look at eggs and I say, and I explain a lot of baking science. Eggs are thickening agents. Okay, eggs can hold air. Meringues, egg whites can hold air. They can leaven things. So there's a lot of different, a lot of science lessons in here, and I explain why ingredients react the way they do, and I explain some of those reactions. But it's done in a very fundamental, basic way, so nobody is scared and thinking, well, this is like a high-end chemistry book. It's not. Very, very user-friendly. I have a lot of home chefs that love it too.
Great. We only have another minute or so. Is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't covered? Or
yeah, I'm
emphasize?
actually, my next project is trying to get a healthy cooking series on the air for kids. It's never been done. There's nothing like it. Not even on the Food Channel. There is nothing like it. Kids seem to be always pushed by the wayside. They can watch what the grown-ups are making. Well, they want to do things themselves, and they don't want to have things just prepped on their own. They want to get in there and really be cutting. And anytime, for instance, if a cooking show has a kid on as a guest, they don't really let them do a lot. Well, I let my kids do everything in my cooking classes, and I think kids are capable. So I'm going to be doing that and pairing up with your library to do hopefully a series at some point, but a show that I can maybe even take with me as a pilot to networks and try to get this on the air, whether it's local or whether it's national. I'm really looking forward, because kids need to learn to eat healthy, especially in the society that we live in right now. We're getting heavier as time goes on.
Right, and we want to keep our next generation
alive and well.
Alive and well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you so much for being with us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Thank you for being with us, Parenting in the 21st Century.